The Chargers are in a really bad salary cap situation right now, and it's starting to become more and more likely that they have to part ways with Keenan Allen.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 7 seasons together, but this is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. And David, conversation we don't want to have, right? What do the Chargers do with Keenan Allen because of their salary cap space? Daniel Popper came out with a great article on The Athletic, just really outlining what the Chargers salary cap situation is right now. And it feels like the Chargers can't get rid of Keenan Allen, but it's very hard to find where the money is going to come from, especially when Keenan Allen is playing. He's still producing at an elite level, and it's a very tough situation. And we will get into a situation where there is a way that they can keep Keenan Allen and get under the salary cap. And we'll also talk about, hey, if you're just going to resign yourself to cutting him, or do you trade him? Do you try to get something out of that? And also just the fact that, like, are you helping Justin Herbert by making this move? You know, Justin Herbert should be getting more weapons, not less weapons. And it puts the Chargers in a really, really tough spot. But this episode of Locked On is brought to you by Nissan. The only thing more exciting than the big game is the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria. There's only 5 days left to the Super Bowl. Are you ready? The Nissan Aria, the EV for the people who love to drive. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Here we are, David. Shout out to Daniel Popper and Athletic, always writing very good content, and I think outlines this tricky salary cap situation pretty well, honestly. But this is the basic, gist of it, David. The Chargers are $23 million over the cap, basically, if you factor in what their rookies are going to be paid or need to be paid because of their draft slots. So the Chargers have to clear that up before the new league year starts. They have to be able to get under it. And there's only so many places where it can come, but it's just crazy that we're here right now having to have this conversation of it becoming more likely. As Daniel Popper said, he thinks the likeliest situation is that Keenan Allen, one of the franchise's best wide receivers ever, is going to be cut.
Yeah, it's hard to sit here and fathom. Just sitting here as a lifelong Charger fan, a guy who has watched Keenan Allen perform, since, he came into the league in 2013 when he was absolutely, just an unbelievable third round pick, a guy that played with just beautiful grace, the ability to get open and really just be a lot more explosive than we ever expected. And, now he sits here with the Chargers, and he's number 2 in receiving yards, number 2 in receptions, just simply one of the best receivers in Chargers history. So to sit here and to have to,
and who is he behind in those?
Antonio
he's
Gates,
up there with
Charlie Joyner.
It's Lance Allworth.
Not Charlie Joyner, Lance Allworth. Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously great Hall of Fame type players. And that's kind of the track that Keenan is on. And, to have to sit here to, actually have this conversation legitimately kind of hurts your heart a little bit.
And it's like, I'm still hoping, there's a way that they can figure it out. But like at this point, it only comes to pushing the problems further down the road, pushing bigger cap hits to later years, by restructuring contracts. Because when you restructure contracts, it does open up more salary cap space for that year.
Yeah.
But it adds to the cap hit of whatever years are left on that player's contract. So it's just getting moved down the road. They have more space down the road. So in certain situations, that makes sense. But you're not going to be able to get out of it. The bill's always going to come at some point, right? And if you think about restructuring Keenan Allen, you're not really helping yourself out much, because right now, after this season, the Chargers could get out of his contract with only $2.7 million in dead cap, and they could basically save all of that money over $20 million. This is where it's at right now, though. If they wanted to restructure, according to Popper, $8 million they could save this year, which would help. But then their $2.7 million dead cap hit next year would move up to $11 million. So it just makes it harder then. Right now, if they release him, they save $14.8 million. If they give him a post June 1st designation on cutting him, they would save $17.5 million. That's a big chunk out of that $23 million, right? That they have to get to, obviously.
Yep.
And the post-June 1st designation is basically 2 players from your team. You can give a post-June 1st designation cut to, and even if you cut them in March, you can still designate it for after June 1st. And what that would do is let him go try to find a new team and would give the Chargers the leeway during free agency to do what they have to do, right? So that's
Yeah.
on the table. But David, I mean, even last season, like Keenan Allen was their most consistent offensive weapon when he was healthy. He was their most dynamic offensive weapon when he was healthy. In the 8 games he was healthy, not including the game he got hurt first or the Seahawks game where he came in and could barely play, he averaged in those games 7.5 catches, 84 receiving yards, right? And half a touchdown, basically. If you span that over a season, this is where he would rank 1,400 yards, which would have ranked 6th in the league this season, 127 catches, second, 8 touchdowns, tied for 9th, all amongst wide receivers. That's top 10 numbers and basically all of the big receiving categories, right? So he was still an elite receiver when he was healthy this year. And that's what makes this so tough. But the other thing is he still only played 10 games, right? So like the health has to be factored into it, even though he's not injury prone. The amount of time it took him to come back from that hamstring injury is obviously weighing heavy because that's a big decision you have to make right now. If you knew you were going to get 17 games of Keenan Allen next year, I think you sign up for that every time, right? And you make it work. But it's not just as simple as that.
No, it's not. I mean, that's why, people make a lot of money to have to make these type of decisions. But to sit here and tell me that Keenan Allen is injury prone just lets me know that you don't really pay attention to the Chargers or Keenan Allen because
Right.
yeah, he had some issues in the beginning of his career with the ACL, but those are like major type of injuries. Then he comes back and he plays 16 or 17 games in 5 straight seasons, has 97 plus catches in almost all of those seasons, almost 1,000 yards or more in every single one of those seasons until this year. And yes, you have to also consider that Keenan Allen is on the wrong side of 30. And we know that whenever you hit that kind of threshold, things start to take a little bit longer to have to recover from. And, he plays a position that requires his legs to be in top shape. He's a technician type receiver. He relies on that quickness, on that route running prowess, that ability. So, it's definitely something that it's a really, really tough decision. But factoring all of these things in place, it's hard to imagine you're going to be able to replace Keenan Allen, but it's also hard to kind of figure out where the money's going to come from because it has to come from somewhere.
I think it's just hard to imagine them cutting out and getting better, right?
That's
And
exactly
being
right.
better offensively. I mean, last year he was obviously really good when he was out there. But at the same time, David, like the money has to come from somewhere. I mean, this is from Popper as well. There's only 6 players on the Chargers that can save $4+ million. Anyone who's saying cut JC Jackson or Joey Bosa, if you cut Joey Bosa, you get $38 million in dead cap money.
Not
If you
happening.
cut JC Jackson, it's about $20 million this season, and you're
Also
not
not
saving any
happening.
money.
No.
It doesn't make any sense. You won't save money on those contracts until after the 2023 season. That's just how it's set up in their contracts.
Yep.
These are the guys. Khalil Mack, you could save $22.9 million if you cut him post June 1st. That's basically everything you need right there. But you're cutting Khalil Mack, and you only have Chris Rumph behind him. You have 3 edge rushers under contract right now: Rumph, Bosa, and Khalil Mack.
Just can't do
You
it.
cut Keenan Allen. You cut Michael Davis, who's as important now as ever. You cut Matt Filer, which is obviously something we think is likely.
Yeah,
but that's
like
only
automatic.
$6.5 million that you save right there out of $23 million. That's just a small chunk out of that.
Yep.
Corey Linsley, $5.3 million or $10.5 million post June 1st, 5.3 before June 1st. You can't cut Corey Linsley. Like you
It's
just
not even
can't.
in the conversation.
Right. And then there's Gerald Everett at $4.25 million, which is also just a small chunk too, right? Even if you think that money could, or that production is more easily replaced than Keenan Allen, which it is. It's just going to be really tough. I mean, the Chargers are going to have to restructure a lot. They're going to have to really, cut all of these ancillary guys. And Daniel Popper, to his credit, did outline a way that the Chargers could get under the cap without cutting Keenan Allen, with some restructuring, with a couple of other cuts to some veterans on their roster. So we're going to talk about the scenario that keeps Keenan Allen on the team, because I think that's what most fans would prefer at this point. He's been such a good player for them. And we're also going to talk about, hey, if you're going to cut him, you better at least get something for him. I mean, this is too good of a player to let go for free. But what could you get back for him with his age, with his cap hit, and all those things? So we're going to talk about that. But I do need to tell you guys that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, my favorite daily fantasy app. And right now, you guys should be getting your selections in for the big game. And with PrizePicks, it's different than other daily fantasy sites because all you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections, and even if you're not trying to do football, right? With the big game coming up this weekend. Hopefully everyone has their parties plans. You can do a bunch of other sports too, especially if the Chargers have scarred you too much to go with football. You can go NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, whatever you're looking for, you can find it at PrizePicks. And the entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. And it's that easy with safe and fast withdrawals. They're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So make sure you guys download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports today. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That means you put $100 in, they will match that $100. If you put in $50, they will give you $50. So don't forget to use the promo code Locked On at sign up for that instant deposit match up to $100. I think the question on many fans' minds is, hey, there has to be a way the Chargers can keep Keenan Allen, right? As bad as it looks right now, you see other teams like the Saints and, other teams who have put themselves
Just
in
figure
very,
it
very
out.
deep. Right.
Yeah.
And they've been pushing the can down the road for a while, and they'll probably continue to do that this year, right?
They have to, yeah.
Poor Ross Jackson.
I know.
But there is a way. There are ways that they can do it, but they're going to have to push some money down the road. And this is the most simple way to do it that Daniel Popper outlines here. He says you have start by cutting Gerald Everett and Matt Filer to save $10.75 million, and you restructure Joey Bosa to save the max amount, which would save the Chargers another about $15 million, right? And that would get them up to $25.97 million in savings, enough to get under the cap, enough to pay their draft picks, but only a little bit left over. So as much as we're saying, it is doom and gloom, technically, David, there is still a chance. There is a pathway for the Chargers to make it work with Keenan Allen still on the roster.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I mean, I don't care about we can't do it. The money is tight. Figure it out. I mean, we've seen a bunch of other teams across the league do just unbelievable, ridiculous cap gymnastics to get cap compliant and to be able to field a quality football team. And, one of the things that just kind of keeps ringing in my mind is Tom Telesco saying, I'd rather have a bunch of good players than a lot of cap space. And, he was talking specifically about Keenan Allen in that situation. So, this is not just, a good situation. It seems like a likely situation. If they do want to keep Keenan Allen on the roster, there are going to have to be some cuts that they're going to have to make. And these are the ones that, I think hurt the least amount if you're going to want to do this. If your plan is to keep Keenan, I think this is a decent plan to go with.
Well, the Filer one's obvious, right? But that's the only kind of example that we're talking about today where the Chargers have a clear backup plan. You have Jamari Sawyer, right? That you feel like can go in and fill in at left guard.
Yes.
You don't have a Gerald Everett replacement. You don't have a Keenan Allen replacement, right? In the depth behind him. You don't have a Joey Bosa or a Khalil Mack replacement, obviously.
Nope.
So, at left guard, you feel fine. Gerald Everett hurts. He was very productive. He played a big role for the Chargers offense this season.
Yeah.
Either way, it just seems a lot more likely you'd be able to find someone, right, that could replace Gerald Everett's production easier than you could go find someone that can replace Keenan Allen's production. And, you still want to get more explosive. You still want to do other things and kind of revamp the offense in that way.
Yeah.
Still, it's just not that easy to do. And the other thing is with getting cap compliant in this scenario, right? Getting that 25.97 by restructuring Joey Bosa and cutting Gerald Everett and Matt Filer.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the money coming from, David? Because at that point, that you're only $3 million under the cap, and you have free agents like Trey Pipkins, like Drew Tranquill, like Morgan Fox. So, even in this situation, David, it still doesn't seem like a Keenan Allen cut would be totally out of the question because it's where is the money coming from to keep adding on? Because we know this Chargers team, as it's currently constituted, isn't enough, and health is a big factor and all of those things. But how do you even keep most of this nucleus together?
Right. Well, that's just the starting point. That's not the end. That's only the beginning of the moves that they have to make.
That's a lot of gymnastics already. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And a couple other restructures that Daniel Popper kind of points out is, you can restructure JC Jackson and get $8.19 million and also get $6.22 million if you restructure Corey Linsley. I mean, a couple players, more so Linsley, you're not going to cut Corey. Obviously, he's integral to the Chargers' success on the offensive line. So that seems like a move that's almost a done deal to make. And for JC, that's a little bit trickier because you just don't know the nature of the recovery of his injury, because that particular injury, the torn patellar tendon, could be a career ender. We just don't know on how that is going to happen. Obviously, cross your fingers and, he comes back and he's 100% and he can be that same guy. But those are a couple other moves that can give you a little bit more space to try to, keep Keenan and also try to retain some of the other players that you need to bring back into the fold, because they can't afford to lose everybody. They're going to have to make some things happen.
And all of those restructures, right, are just going to make it higher cap hits that you have after the
That's
season.
right, yeah.
It's just going to, make it tougher. But
all your actions have consequences, but
of
you
course,
got to do what you got to do.
But yeah, exactly. And you're going to have to deal with some of those things. It's just, you also have to think about the Chargers and what they've done historically, right? Which is not restructure a lot of contracts.
That's
last year
true.
was one of the first times we've seen Tom Telesco do it. You can count on my one hand how many times.
Yeah, Ed McGuire
Tom
does not like
Telesco's done it.
restructuring. Yeah.
No, because they don't like dead cap, and restructuring creates more dead cap later on down the road, especially for someone like JC Jackson. After next year, you can get out of that contract at pretty much $5 million in dead cap for his last 3 seasons and save about $30 million plus, right? So you have an avenue there to get out of it. And right now you want that avenue. If you're putting that money elsewhere, it's hard. And it feels like you just kind of have to bite the bullet on it, even though you don't even know if JC Jackson can be an impact player for the Chargers in 2023, which makes it tough.
Yeah.
If you are resorting to, hey, we have to cut Keenan Allen, we have to get him off the books to make anything work in 2023, right? If the Chargers have decided it, though, why would you ever cut him? Why would you not get something back for him? I don't even know why cutting him is an option right now, just because, you'd be doing him a favor. He'd get an option to go, re-sign, and have his choice of teams. But, even if he gets traded, all that money he's still going to get. He's not going to lose a lot out of that, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, David, for a player that good, you can't come away with nothing from that.
You better not. You absolutely better not. If you are, like you said earlier, if you are resigning yourself and you have already made up the decision in your mind that we are going to move on from Keenan Allen, we have to do this for the longevity of our franchise, to be able to keep all the other guys that we want to keep, or be able to make the moves we want to make, you better get something out of him, because he is still extremely productive and very valuable. And I know that there are several teams with an unbelievable, outrageous amount of cap space that would be more than happy to add Keenan Allen to the fold. You're going to sit here and tell me that the Chicago Bears wouldn't call up the Chargers and say, hey, I'll make a deal for Keenan Allen to give to our young superstar quarterback? Of course
that's
they
one
would.
that's been floated around there.
And they
got
sure.
There's other teams.
They got $90 million in cap. They have so much money they don't even know what to do with this offseason. So there's a bunch of teams that, even with Keenan over 30 years old, would definitely bring him into the fold, because they know he is still a productive receiver in this league.
And unfortunately, it just seems like whatever they get back in that trade is just not going to feel worth it for how
it doesn't feel like it.
And man, let's be honest, dude, he's just a fun player. He's been fun to cover. He's been fun to watch. His career arc and having him do what he's been able to do has been great.
The charisma, the personality on and off the football field, the production, the guy that talks trash and backs it up.
Sure.
He's just been a really, really good football player and a really fun, really just awesome personality to be able to cover the entirety of his career, and hopefully we get to continue that.
Yeah, for sure. But it's hard to know what you're going to get back from it. And that's the hard thing about this, because with the cap situation for him, right, since it could kind of be a 1-year deal, if it doesn't work out for whatever team, the team would have a ripcord to get out of it after the 2023 season. So there is some freedom there, or keep him at a, $20+ million cap hit, which isn't that much for receivers nowadays anyways, at least the elite receivers, if you're producing like that. But A.J. Brown goes for a first and a third. Obviously, he was coming off his rookie contract. Same thing with Hollywood Brown, right? And you get a first-round pick for a third in Hollywood Brown. Devontae Adams, a first and a second at 29. Obviously, that's closer to Keenan Allen's age, but was playing as the best receiver in the entire NFL. So it's hard to even really, it's hard to compare it to that one. And then you have someone like Amari Cooper, right? 27 multiple 1,000-yard seasons. He gets a 5th-round pick back. The Cowboys do for that. And then you have like a DeAndre Hopkins, right, where it's like a 2nd-round pick, and David Johnson swapping 4th-round pick. So it's kind of all over the place as far as where these receivers go. But the Chargers don't have a ton of leverage if teams think they're going to have to cut him to get under the cap. And that's what makes it a lot more tricky. But if they do trade him as opposed to cutting him, they're still going to save $16.3 million in cap space if they do it before, free agency starts in March and all those things. So it would take a big chunk out of it. Still, this is the hardest thing, David. How can the Chargers not get a lot worse without Keenan Allen, right? Is Josh Palmer ready to step up? You don't have very much left after Keenan Allen and after, Mike Williams and Josh Palmer, and you're still, from a physical trait side of things, not the most well-balanced room. So we're going to talk about that, and just also Justin Herbert, like taking away his best weapon, his guy he is most comfortable with, his security blanket, and how that's going to affect him. But before that, I do need to tell you guys about my favorite protein bar on the planet. And of course, I'm talking about Built Bars. And when I'm sad, one of the things that makes me feel better is being able to eat something that tastes great and also fits on my diet. And that's both things checked off by Built Bars. Because not only with Built Bars are you getting something that's low in carbs, low in sugar, low on calories, but you're also getting something that tastes great. You're busting up the monotony of your diet and all the boring things that you have to eat with your New Year's resolutions. You can have a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. You can get great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, double chocolate, and so much more. And all the bars are 100% covered in real chocolate as well. So you're getting it there. And it is now more widely available than it has ever been. Right now, it's so nice that instead of having to order my Built Bars, I could just run to Walmart and get a box from Walmart and get a pack of cookies and cream or coconut puff. Or I could go to Sam's Club and get an even bigger box. I could get a 13-bar box with one like brownie batter, churro, whatever the great flavors they have are there. There's so many to choose from. That's the other thing too, is just such a variety of flavors. When you're dieting, when you're trying to stick to something, it's hard because you're having the same thing so often. They have so many great flavors at Built Bar, and you can keep switching things up so you don't get bored of it. And that is such a big part of it. And the best thing is they taste great, because if they didn't taste great, I wouldn't be able to eat them. So right now, guys, go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON15. You can save some money. You can get 15% off your next order at BuiltBar.com. So we've talked about why the Chargers would need to potentially cut Keenan Allen, why we're even having to have this conversation at this point because of the, situation the Chargers have really put themselves in, right? A lot of places where you don't have heir apparents, and it's hard to find replacements for Pro Bowl level players, right? Top 10 to 15 level players in some situations, right? Guys who haven't been able to produce like that in the past. It's a business, and you can't be emotional about it as much as there's so many emotions attached to having someone like Keenan Allen on your team with all the charisma and things like that he brings to the table. But at the just most basic level, David, like, you go into this offseason, and one of the biggest things that you say is you need to get Justin Herbert more explosiveness on his offense, right? Keenan Allen doesn't necessarily fit that mold, but ideally you would want to add to what you have, not lose anything from that, right? And that's the thing, is just, if you get rid of Keenan Allen, who does Justin Herbert throw to on a big third down or fourth down, right? Are you trusting Mike Williams in that situation? We saw it against the Browns this year when they had to go to him on a fourth down and he kind of got locked down, probably interfered with a little bit, but still, he's not necessarily that guy. I don't know if Josh Palmer is like that. Like, yeah, you could get more speed by cutting Keenan Allen and you bring in a rookie or something like that. And we'll talk about the rookies, but like, I just don't know how this helps Justin Herbert by getting rid of the guy who's been most consistent with him, his favorite target through his first 3 years.
And I'm right there with you. I mean, it's just hard to conceive that you're going to be able to bring in somebody who is so dynamic on third down, who's just such a security blanket, has just an unbelievable knack and innate sense of the soft spots in the defense and the ability to win off the line of scrimmage, right off the line of scrimmage, without having that elite speed. That's what Keenan does. That's what Keenan is capable of doing. He gets open more than anyone else on the Chargers offense, besides maybe Austin Eckler. But even then, he's unbelievable, and that security blanket for Justin. And I think that's incredibly important to have. I don't know how you can take him off of this offense, and then no matter what you do, whether you're signing a free agent or whether you're bringing somebody in from the draft, can sit here and expect that player to be able to step in to a future Hall of Famer's shoes and replace that type of production.
It's hard to imagine at this point where we sit right now. Another thing is too, I think another common misconception with some fans is just like, you can't really cut Keenan Allen and then just go sign another receiver to replace him, right? I mean, if you're cutting him without the post June 1st, designation,
yeah,
you're saving $14.6 million. Like, if you want
Not
an
enough.
Allen Lazard, right? You want someone like a Juju Smith-Schuster, a Jacoby Myers, right? Guys that you think you could come in and give you some of that production. Like, all those guys are going to cost 12 plus million. So there's no point in cutting Keenan for 15 million or even 17 million to turn around and give another receiver 12 million. That's
and
not,
get
maybe
worse.
Yeah, potentially. Maybe you get more explosive, right? Maybe you get a little faster and other things, but it's hard to imagine you get better with any of those guys. Those guys aren't the player that Keenan Allen is, even at this point in his career, based on what he was doing last year when he was healthy, right? So I think that's another misconception, is like, just because you cut Keenan Allen doesn't mean you can just go out and replace him.
Right.
with a free agent wide receiver, right? Because that's just a backwards way of thinking about it. You won't have cutting Keenan Allen by itself doesn't even get you under the salary cap, right?
No.
Like you'd have to go Keenan Allen plus a bunch of other moves to open up enough space to even have that conversation. At that point, why are you cutting a dude for $15 million just to go sign a $12 million receiver who doesn't
Yeah.
have that chemistry with
Doesn't
your
make
quarterback,
sense.
has never played in your offense? You don't know what it's going to translate like on a new team. And then with what they have right now, like it just cutting him puts the Chargers wide receiver situation in a really dire spot, because if you
Yeah.
get rid of him, then you just have Mike Williams and Josh Palmer. I think at this point with Josh Palmer, he struggled at times when he was
Yeah.
forced to be a number one option this year or a number
Mhm.
two option at times this year, right? I mean, I think you can argue, yeah, argue that he's a solid number three receiver, right, and shown potential. Maybe
Yeah.
he's shown the potential he could potentially be a number two someday, but I don't think he's ready to step up and replace Keenan Allen or do enough to cut into the production that they're losing with him.
Yeah, we've seen some decent uptick, from his rookie year. He had, 49 targets, 33 receptions, 353 yards, 4 touchdowns. And he had a nice jump in his sophomore season. 72 receptions, 769 yards and 3 touchdowns. So doubled his amount of receiving yards, and he did have a lot more opportunities, but like you said, there were some certain games out there where it felt like Josh Palmer disappeared, and he
Right.
really wasn't a guy that was making any kind of significant difference on the offense. So to put that amount of pressure on Josh Palmer to have to step up and try to replace that type of production, it just doesn't seem like he's ready to step in. Even though you see some similar traits, you see some similar ability, it's clear that he's learning from Keenan Allen, but I don't think the Padawan is ready to replace the master quite yet.
Yeah, and I mean, he gives you a little bit more speed, but we've never seen him translate as a deep target so far in 2 years in his
Yeah, he had
NFL
one
career.
50-yard touchdown against the
And it
49ers
was a
this year,
broken
but
coverage, right? Like he
yeah,
found himself wide open. It wasn't as if he
sure.
just kind of outran the defense. It was a good play design that got DeAndre Carter, I think, the week before for a big game, kind of like
Yep.
that, or the week after, opening drive touchdown.
Yeah.
Either way, it doesn't make you that much more explosive. It doesn't make you better. You're not going to get that much production out of it. And like I think the hard thing is too, and another misconception that's out there is like just because you cut Keenan Allen and say, first of all, you're pigeonholing yourself, right? If you cut
Yeah.
Khalil Mack, it feels like you have to draft an edge rusher in the first round, right?
Yes.
If you cut Keenan Allen, it feels like you have to take off a wide receiver in the first round, right? So it's giving yourself less flexibility with what you want to do in the draft, because it feels like you need to add not even one, but multiple receivers. And that's the other thing here too, is it's like, who have the Chargers drafted at wide receiver since Mike Williams, right? Like they should have been planning for this. They didn't have the other options when Mike Williams' contract came up last year to let him walk away. And now
No,
they don't have the options this year to let Keenan Allen walk away. And it's partly mismanagement, right? You
I
drafted
agree.
KJ Hill as a 7th-round pick. Okay, he flamed out. Joe Reed didn't turn anything as a 5th-round pick. You have guys
No.
like Dylan Cantrell as a 6th-round pick, right? We
Yep.
didn't see these investments being paid into this position for when the Chargers ended up getting to this spot. And it's also a receiver room that wasn't built correctly as far as guys with redundant skill sets, and none of them really having quick twitch anything, right? They're
Yeah.
not fast dudes. They're not after the
That's
catch guys, and
that's
they're
right.
not deep guys, right?
Yeah.
And the one thing I see is cut him, get a first round receiver. It's not going to be that easy, David. There's no first round receiver you're going to get this year that's going to be able to come in and fill the shoes of Keenan Allen. It's just not going to happen.
It's not. It's not at all. I mean, I don't care who you're getting. I mean, it could be, somebody who's
Jalen
just
Hyatt, Zay
right.
Flowers, a lot of those
Exactly.
guys people are
Those
targeting, sure.
quick twitch, type of explosive college receivers. That's the college game. This is the pros. And Keenan Allen has been playing at the top of his position for the better part of a decade. So
Yeah.
that intimate knowledge of defenses, that comfortability with the quarterback, the just unbelievable ability to get off the line of scrimmage and get open. You can't expect anyone to come in here, let alone a rookie, to be able to step into those shoes and really make it look anywhere close to what Keenan Allen is capable of doing on a game in and game out basis.
When in the ideal world, you're adding one of these dudes to Keenan Allen, right?
Exactly.
You're
That's
getting
what you
dudes
need to
that
do.
complement them better. You're getting dudes
Yeah.
that are going to open up things more for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and what they do well, right? And what Mike
Yes.
Williams and Keenan Allen do well would help rookie receivers. When
Yes.
you don't have those guys, the other guys have to worry about on third down, it makes it a lot more easy to game plan when people know what the shtick is,
Sure.
and that you have less intimidating options to have to worry about. So like, adding a wide receiver, sure. You could get a nice complement, a fast guy to go along with 3 guys who aren't very fast, and Palmer, Mike
Yes.
Williams, and Keenan Allen. That's
Yeah.
a well-rounded receiving room, right?
Yep.
without Keenan Allen, it just becomes, where do you go? How do you get better? How does this help Justin Herbert? And it's
Yeah.
hard to argue any of those things right now because as we sit here with a 30-plus-year-old Keenan Allen, it seems like their best option at wide receiver is hopefully getting 17 games out of Keenan Allen in
Yeah.
2023. That's
Yes.
the most productive receiver I could see it, realistically being in this conversation. It's still keeping Keenan Allen. And that's why it's so hard because you put yourself in a cap spot situation now where that might not be an option. Him getting cut and him getting traded feels like a very, very real thing right now. And it sucks, like we talked about. He's a really
Yeah.
good player. A lot of Keenan Allen jerseys out there. He's a fun guy. And he still got it. And
Yeah.
he's still elite when he's out there. It's just you put yourself in a really, really tough spot and you didn't give yourself a lot of backup plans. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. I'm excited to see how it plays out. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I'm excited to see what the Chargers and Ed McGuire and Tom Telesco try to do to kind of finagle this thing and figure out how to make it work. But it's going to be really, really tough. But tomorrow is a big day because we are turning the show over to you guys. We are getting into our Chargers mailbag. And if you have any questions about Keenan Allen or whatever Chargers related, make sure to hit us up at Locked On LAC. We'll be putting a post out on Twitter where you guys can ask your questions on there. Or you can hit us up on our Locked On Chargers voicemail line. If you guys want to call into 323-524-7924 and give us a 30-second question, you are most likely going to get on the show if you keep it relevant. We love getting those voicemails where maybe we'll hear from a tier. He's a long-time caller. But you can also find the show anywhere you get your podcast from, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever. Make sure you're following there so you make sure you get those episodes on your phone. You don't have to go search for them, or just subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel as well. You can also find the show on the rest of our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD, as well as finding our Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Thank you guys as well for making us your first listen today. If you guys need a second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Me and David go on that all the time too, but it's just the best way to keep up with everything going on around the league. It's a nice bite-sized portion, getting local insights from all of the different experts that only Locked On can really give, having a coverage of every team every day. But you can find it wherever you get your podcast from, just like the Locked On Chargers podcast. But make sure you guys are here tomorrow for the Chargers mailbag, getting into the biggest Chargers storylines and everything going on. And then we have Chris Rump coming on Thursday's show. So make sure you guys are here for that and subscribing and following all the right places so you make sure you don't miss that big time interview where we ask him the hard hitting questions. But until tomorrow, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.